a difference between the LSD experience and the DMT experience. I experienced there was a certain development of the LSD experience also over a period of time, and maybe for a year or more. I had a number of LSD experiences where I tried to develop a clearer and clearer picture of my own as to what that experience was. And the first DMT experience was completely of another character, and that's what fascinated me. And I did DMT for a period, and then I stopped. Well, I continued doing LSD for some years afterwards. And my impression is that my DMT experience was completely different after this DMT period. That once this window number 2 had been opened by DMT, I could access it with LSD. I could go to a variety of places and try to connect them up. But I don't know, this is just an illusion. And also Ray had this opinion, as we did a number of LSD trips together, that she felt that I had a slightly different window than hers. And the DMT experience is more abstract than the LSD experience. It is farther away from ordinary reality, or anything that you could relate to ordinary reality using a language of models, metaphors, poetic expression, and so on. And my experience with psilocybin mushrooms and peyote also, I would say, is closer to reality, that you see ordinary reality embellished with vibratory fields. You see more or less the connection between ordinary reality and this other thing that you could say is enhanced reality. So with DMT, there, for me, was no residue of ordinary reality whatsoever, and therefore to try to distill some kind of meaning out of those experiences was difficult. And for me, because of my training in mathematics, I use mathematics extensively in order to document, record, comment, and so on my experiences. For example, in DMT experience, I would see a vibratory field like fractal computer graphics, which is very animated at high speed. Also medium speed, also lower speed. So there would be bands in a spectrum of speed, as it were. And these activities at different speeds would appear to be different intelligences saying different things or conveying completely different categories of information. You could see some coordinated activities in vastly different regions that appeared to be coordinated to such extent that it had to be something like, well, an intelligence, an entity or something, that in ordinary reality would only be accepted as an entity if it were connected, that is, it had a body, as it were. And this not only had more than one body, but it was dispersed through space fractally with a certain frequency, color. It was the dynamic, really, which identified this information. And with LSD, in my first series of LSD experiences, before I took DMT, it didn't have that aspect at all. I would have images that were familiar from, let's say, Euclidean geometry. You know, what is the role of time, the illusion of time, and so on in the reality of our lives? I think that the let us say, clairvoyance as classical parapsychology, this paranormal experience of clairvoyance suggests that the past, the present, and the future are interconnected in some way that is beyond evolution, and it is beyond the Platonic model, and so on. So non-locality and non-temporality, if we can understand this aspect of ordinary reality, then we have to have a different theory about how we decide what to do in life. And in order to be in harmony with that kind of universe as it exists, we would, I think, have to proceed more by intuition, which is in tune with that, as opposed by mentation, rational thought, and so on, according to physics and the like, which physics says the future is not determined. The past is completely different from the future. There's the collapse of the wave function or something that happens through a mysterious process of observation. And in that model, it matters very much what you do to create the future. If there is, the future already has, let us say, a spectrum of possibilities with different probability measures that are changed by our mentation and so on. And I think in that paradigm, we would have to give a higher priority to the arts, to intuitive workers, and to the Sufi idea of love, that kind of thing, that if you are in harmony in some sense with the world as it wishes to be, then you're a better person in terms of, this non-temporal morality.
I first heard of DMT in 1966 when I was a freshman at the University of California at Santa Cruz. And, that was the beginning of that era. And I remember I was on my way into a harpsichord concert that had already started. And a friend said, "Here, this is a very special joint. Smoke this one." And we did, and then walked into a beautiful storm of harpsichord notes that were moving and dancing with the apparent individual and collective will. And so that was it was apparently marijuana laced with a little DMT. And then I didn't encounter it again for years until I was offered a pipe full of the pure substance, and that was 1975.
When you first heard about it, was there anything specific that you heard, or did you kind of go into this blindly when you first heard about it, or were there some experiences that you heard from others, or some stories, or?
Well, that first time that I just described was just happenstance and experimentation. The second time was with the fellow who would later be my husband, Terrence McKenna, and I'd known him for some years already, and he had been talking about it, and basically it was our first date. And he said, sort of ticket, I guess, in a way, let's see where you go and what you feel about it, and prepared me for not the content really, but the force and the scope, and it was even much more than it was presented as. Well, the fact that DMT exists in so many species, and the tryptamines is a larger category in so many species of the fungi, the plants, and the animals, ourselves included. Of course, all we can do is purely speculate right now, but I feel like it must grant some evolutionary advantage, or it wouldn't have persisted in so many species, and it wouldn't be so, it wouldn't still be here if it didn't have an ongoing utility and offer something, if not constant utility, constant insight, than the ability to go to that perspective that it offers. And actually, this is just maybe my imaginative way of putting it, but I kind of think of that presence in the human and in the plants and all these others as kind of like little windows into this other realm that is actually right here all the time. And I do think that we are working with those in our dream state, and that it's playing a role in altered states that come into our lives through all sorts of intense experiences. Various kinds of psychic experiences, telepathic. I think of birth and giving birth and that process and the visionary aspect of that. And then, of course, the way that we seek it in the plants and the fungi, and seek the enhancement or the opening up of these zillion little windows.